Welcome back everyone, John Panio here with another video. Today we're going to be going over status effects because I was wrong in the last video. Paralyze is actually working as intended. It's just that my reading comprehension and how the game words certain things got me confused. The game actually works as intended. It's just with how they decide to word things, it can be confusing if you are assuming things. But if you actually read, the game actually works. And let me explain what I mean by that. When I was playing this game, I noticed that Ishmael, when she uses her snake harpoon, she applies bind, but the blind applies next turn. And when I saw that, I inferred that, okay, speed decreases for the potency for one turn. I assumed that because of this wording, paralysis works under the same assumption too. So when I apply the paralysis, it ticks for one turn next turn. But what I didn't realize was that the game actually tells you that it does not apply this turn. So when you go into Ishmael's ego, it actually says, on hit, inflict 6 bind next turn. So the game actually does explicitly tell you it doesn't apply the blind this turn, because if it applied the bind this turn, it would go away at the end of the turn. It applies bind on the next turn. So that means with the status effect, this status effect comes into play next turn, and for that one turn, bind's in effect. And surprisingly, with Ishmael, with her identity, her first skill, which is the skill that I got very confused with, on hit inflict 3 paralysis, this literally means inflict 3 paralysis this turn. And as a result, that means with this paralysis, for this one turn, the opponent's power of their X coins go to 0. So this acts the same way as charge, acts the same way as burn, where it goes away or goes down by 1 count at the end of the turn. So I got confused because I assumed the interaction worked the same as the ego, but that's not the case. One turn means end of turn, and as for a person who plays gacha game and for a person who plays RPG, that to me is counterintuitive a little bit, because number one, paralyze only works against enemies that have 2 skills queued up or against an abnormality with multiple body parts, because in that way paralyze can then actually be used. But if the enemy is like a trash mob and only has 1 skill, and you use paralyze and you clash and you win, then the paralyze is useless because no one else is gonna be attacking that enemy because you've already won your clash. And even if they're attacking again, since the enemy's clash card is gone, the paralyze doesn't mean much. It only really is useful if the enemy has 2 skills queued up. So that explains how paralyze works. Paralyze is only useful when you're fighting a boss or when you're fighting an enemy that's using 2 skills. Outside of that, paralyze is completely useless. Well, that's good to know. As you can see here, this is just one of the skills that really should read, which really should read for the end of the turn. And for example, bind, same thing, for until the end of the turn. But enough about that. Paralyze, it's working as intended. It's just that I assumed too much and that screwed me over. But with that being said, sorry guys, I made a mistake. Paralyze is working. I'm just an idiot. But we can go over all the other status effects because I understand how it works. And obviously there are certain effects that are very confusing. So I'm going to try my best to explain how things work. So bleed is when tossing an attack coin, take fixed damage by the effect's potency, then reduce its count by 1. So bleed has 2 counters. There is a count counter and a bleed stack counter. What do I mean by that? We're going to be taking a look at 3-star Ryoshu because she's the best example that we have. So for example, Ryoshu's 3rd skill, Lenticular Swirl, inflicts 2 bleed, but her 2nd hit applies 3 bleed count. Oh shoot, should move my head. 1 second. There we go. She inflicts 2 bleed, and on hit, she applies 3 bleed count. So what does that mean? Bleed is just the stacking damage. So if the enemy has 4 bleed, the enemy will take 4 damage if they flip a coin, and if you have 10 stacks, the enemy will take 10 damage if they flip their coin. Simple enough. But when it says on hit apply bleed count +3, this is where it's different. The apply +3 bleed count is essentially applying more ticks to the timer. So if I had 1 bleed count and 4 bleed stacks, that means when the enemy flips their coin, they'll take 1 instance of 4 damage bleed. But let's just say the enemy has 2 counts of bleed and 4 stacks of bleed. It means if the enemy flipped 2 coins, they trigger the first proc for 4 damage. So the first count drops down to 1 and they take 4 damage of bleed. And then they take another 4 damage of bleed, again because there's 1 more count left. So that means with this skill, if everything hits, the enemy will take 2 bleed stack and have 3 bleed count on top of that. That means that if the enemy was to flip 3 coins, they will take 2 damage 3 times because there's bleed count 3. So what makes bleed very strong is if you can have multiple bleed counts with a high bleed stack. If I had 3 bleed count and 10 bleeds, that means if the enemy flips 3 coins, they're gonna take 30 damage in total. And that's how bleed works. Pretty self-explanatory, but can be quite confusing because it doesn't work in how traditional RPGs work with bleed. Rupture, it's also the same thing, but it's a little bit different with bleed. Rupture has a count where it's a count and a rupture stack. So you can build up counts on rupture and you can build up the amount of stacks of rupture. Rupture essentially is if there is 10 stacks of rupture on an enemy and my next unit hits that enemy, it will burst the rupture goes down to 0, and the enemy will take 10 damage. But if there's 2 counts of rupture, what will happen is if there's 2 counts of rupture and there's 10 damage stacked up on the rupture, that means when my first unit hits the enemy, they'll take 10 damage and the rupture count will go down by 1. So there's still 1 count left, and then the next hit on the enemy will do another 10 damage, reducing the count to 0. So rupture is essentially a detonation effect, if that makes sense. Build up as much stacks as possible, obviously, as well as building up counts on it. And the next time next time your teammate hits it, it will deal damage based off of the number of rupture you have and reduce its count by 1. Damage down is simple enough, deals less damage with skills based on the effect potency for 1 turn, max 10. From what I believe, each stack reduces your damage by 10%, but you'll have to double check on the numbers because I don't remember off the top of my head. That's what that means. Now attack power up and attack power down. From my understanding, it says attack skills gain final power by the effect's potency. So from what people have told me, if you have a +2 attack power, it does not mean the base of your skill increases by +2. So let's just say lenticular squirrel does not become 8. The +2 only applies to this +4 right here, from what I understand. That means if you have attack power +2, instead of 8 flipping for 4, you're doing 8 flipping for 6. And vice versa, attack power down, if you have attack power down -2, that means your base is 8, but the potential you'll have is at +2 instead of +4. I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but let me know. This is the one part where I'm still trying to figure it out for myself. Offense down, offense level decreases based off of the effect's potency for 1 turn. Sounds like I remember is 10% for every stack. So that's what that means. It just means your overall offense is down. But with damage down and offense down, I still don't fully understand what that means. All I know right now is you just do less damage with these two and you will have potential to do more damage with these two. With Poise, Poise is a weird one. It says on hit gain a potency based chance to deal crit damage, reducing the count by 1 if successful. At the end of the turn, reduce the count by 1. From reading this, and I still don't get how Poise fully works. My understanding is when you hit someone, you gain a potency based chance to deal critical damage. So it sounds like you increase the chance to deal crit damage, and if you do crit, you lower that count by 1, and then at the end of the turn you reduce the count by 1. So it sounds like there's a potency, count like bleed and like rupture, and then there's a potency stack. So it sounds like you can continuously increase your poise stack, so that way when you do crit, you lower the count by 1. And from what it sounds like, it makes it feel like the longer the fight goes, the higher the chances you are going to crit, and therefore going to do more damage. But at the point right now, I actually don't know how crit works. I don't know if every character has an innate crit rate chance, and I don't know what the crit rate damage modifier is. So Poise is still something that I'm not too sure how it works, but from what I'm understanding is you basically gain stacks where it keeps getting higher and higher and higher up until you crit. That's my understanding of it, but someone else could hopefully explain this better than me because I am still clueless about Poise. Tremor, easy enough. Tremor is when attacked by skills that burst Tremor, raise the stagger threshold by the effect's potency at the end of the turn, reduce the count by 1. This one, the best character to explain with this is obviously using my good old Ishmael, LCCB. So she has Quake rounds and she can inflict 8 Tremor and 2 Tremor count. So this skill can inflict a total of 16 Tremor and 4 Tremor count. Like bleed, you have essentially 4 counts, so this will last for 4 turns. So each turn that this isn't procced, Tremor will go down from 16 stack 4 count to 16 stack 3 count, and then the next turn 16 stacks 2 count, and then 16 stacks 1 count. Tongue to swear. And then only when she uses suppress that has on hit burst Tremor, or a character like Heathcliff with upheaval where it can burst Tremor, that's when you can raise the threshold for the stagger. And all that really means is enemy that have Tremor bursted on them is just much easier to stagger, because that line that normally you would need to stagger somebody just gets pushed up. And that's just what that means. Tremor makes it easier for you to stagger enemies if you can burst the Tremor. Damage up sounds like it increases 10% damage from each stack you get, but that's from my understanding so far. So this is simple enough. Just do more damage when you do damage. 10% for each stack. Sinking, when hit by an attack, take fixed SP damage by effects potency, applies as gloom affinity damage to abnormalities, then reduce its count by 1. So this one just means that enemies take more take sanity damage. They take sanity damage, which essentially makes it so that your chances of rolling a heads on your coin flip is higher for that one instance, and then you reduce its count by 1. The only character that I can think of off the top of my head that really has this play out very well is our boy Sinclair with his sinking right here. So he here can inflict sinking, which basically does sanity damage. But with this skill, if the target's SP is below 0, boost crit chance proportional to target SP, raise user stagger threshold by 50% of the damage dealt. So sinking can be useful with, for example, a character like this, because if the opponent has their sanity below 0, he gets an effect. So lowering a person's sanity not only helps with your coin flip, but certain characters can benefit with enemies with low sanity. Now, protect is simple enough. You can get up to 10 stacks, but essentially with each stack of protect, you get plus 10%, or you take 10% less damage for each stack. So protect is simple enough. This one, I'm not too sure. Sin/damage fragility. Take more damage from sin/damage skills based off of effect potency for 1 turn. This one, couldn't tell you what it is. If you guys know, let me know down in the comment section down below. I don't remember where I've encountered this. Now, ammo is a simple mechanic. It's just essentially for characters such as Ishmael, or also Ishmael LCCB Manager, or also Heathcliff 3-star, because they have skills that spend ammo, and basically what ends up happening is ammo is just really strong. It does lots of damage as well as inflicts insane status effects, but once you're out of ammo, your character becomes much less useful. That's basically it. So these guys are like a one pump chump. Very strong for short battles, but really bad in long battles. Haste is easy enough, just gain +2 speed for this turn. Charge is an interesting resource. Charge is a resource used by certain skills. For additional effects, its count can go up to 20, turn end, lower count by 1. Charge is one of those weird things where I wish they didn't lower the count by 1, because right now there are a lot of characters that suck because they don't generate enough charge on their own. But I'll give you an example. An example of a charge character is Ishmael. So, spend all charge count when you use this Mind Whip. At less than 10 charge count, target a random unit for an unopposed attack. So this character right here does a ton of damage, but if she has less than 10 charge count, she will hit a random unit. So she has the potential to hit your teammate, but she can still potentially hit the opponent. But as you can see, she needs to build up charge. And if you take a look at her skills, she can gain +5 charge on this skill, and she can gain +4 charge from this skill. So if she wanted to use Mind Flay without the drawback of the skill, on the first turn she can gain a maximum of 5 charge, but then next turn it goes down to 4. And let's just say she gets this skill again, she gets her charge up to 9, goes down to 8, and then she gets this skill again, goes up to 14, goes down to 13. So you can see, in order for her to be able to use her charge skill without the negative effect, it takes a lot of time to build up charge. And losing a charge at the end of the turn just doesn't really make sense, but that's just my own opinion. But as you can see, charge, very useful, gives certain characters certain effects for certain skills they use, but it needs to be built up. Burn acts the same as bleed. You can build up burn stacks and also burn count. A character that can do that is 2-star Mersault. So 2-star Mersault has his last skill where his first hit will apply 3 burn, but then his second hit will apply 3 burn count. So what this means is burn only applies at the end of the turn. So at the end of the turn, its count goes down by 1. So you have 2 stacks left. So in this case, if nothing else changed with this third skill, it means he will inflict 3 burn, 3 turns, and the damage procs at the end of the turn. So at the first turn, the enemy will take 3 damage of burn. The count will go down to 2. Next turn, they'll take another 3 stacks of burn. Count goes down to 1. And the third turn, they'll take another 3 damage of burn. Count goes down to 0. So with burn, the enemy takes a total of 9 damage over 3 turns, and that's just how burn works. Burn's like bleed, but instead of proccing when the coin flips, it procs when the enemy turn ends. Which is very interesting because it actually also triggers rupture, because whenever the enemy takes damage, then rupture triggers. So certain status effects can chain off each other. Bind is simple enough. Speed decreased by the effect's potency for 1 turn. From what it sounds like, each stack of bind lowers the opponent's speed by 1, so that's pretty self-explanatory. First is one of the ones where I haven't really played with. It says on turn end self-apply 1 of the following, then reduce this effect's count by 1. 1 attack power down, 1 defense power down, 1 offense level down, 1 defense power down. So from what it sounds like, Curse just applies 1 of these 4 debuffs and then it goes away at the end of the turn. Easy enough. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. There are still definitely things that I'm still not fully understanding about the game, partly because due to me assuming certain things, but also because there are certain things that the game doesn't really explain well. But I would definitely say that status effect is one of those things where you kind of have to read what they do, and you can definitely make it work for you. I will say there are certain status effects that don't really make sense to me, and one of those examples is Paralyze, and the why charge goes down every turn, but that's just me, that's my own opinion. However, if there's anything I missed, let me know down in the comment section down below. I stream on Twitch almost every day right now, And I also have a Discord community, so make sure you guys join me there. Alright, John Panio signing off. I'll see you guys later. Bye for now.